tiny flashlights, I gotta turn it on. Coffee and a tie rise to the occasion. A million tiny flashlights, I gotta turn it off. For a while I'll keep my place, but tonight
Just about every time we use the internet, a communication link, or an app, we agree to some very long terms and conditions. But what exactly are we agreeing to?
You guys! You gotta help me! These business casual G-men are trying to kidnap me! What? It's crazy, dude! They're saying it's because I agreed to the latest terms and conditions on iTunes!
Why? What did the terms and conditions for the last update say?
I don't know, I didn't read them! You didn't read them? Who the hell reads that entire thing every time it pops up? I do.
Can you tell, can Apple tell how many people actually read it?
Well, they have to say that they agree. We can't know for sure if they've read. We try to make it in plain English and very short.
If I were trying to make a user agreement uninviting, I would choose a small font, a sans serif font, and I would set it in all caps. Okay. Because what happens then is that you have type that becomes a texture rather than words and spaces.
No one has read the terms and conditions. No one in the world. No one, even the lawyers who wrote it like this.
You come to a website and they have a set of rules, usually described in a terms of services, and then they have a privacy policy. And as soon as you start using the service, in essence, you have agreed to the terms of service and the privacy policy.
Do these terms and conditions that we sign up for even apply?
They do. I think if they didn't apply, I think the web would topple over. And so to the extent there have been contract decisions, they've held that these terms and conditions are valid.
And this concept is pretty new. For instance, you never had to sign a user agreement for an old-fashioned landline, or to watch TV, or to read a book. But if you use a smartphone, a Kindle, or you watch Hulu, then you do.
Violet, baby, don't you sign anything there. What's this all about?
Standard form of contract.
Don't talk to me about contracts, Wonka. I use them myself. They're strictly for suckers.
Yes, but you wouldn't begrudge me a little protection.
In fact, if you were to read everything you agreed to, it would take 1 full month of work out of every year. That's 180 hours you would need to spend every year. And according to the Wall Street Journal, consumers lose $250 billion each year due to what's hidden in fine print. Here's an example from LinkedIn's terms. You grant LinkedIn a non-exclusive, irrevocable, worldwide, perpetual, unlimited, assignable, sublicensable, fully paid up, and royalty-free right to us to copy, prepare derivative works of, improve, distribute, publish, remove, retain, add, process, analyze, use, and commercialize in any way known or in the future discovered any information you provide directly or indirectly to LinkedIn, including not limited to any generate content, ideas, concepts, techniques, or data set services, use of LinkedIn without any consent, notice, and or competition you or any third party. So LinkedIn takes pretty much everything forever. You'll find this kind of language in Google, Pinterest, Facebook, pretty much anything that people consider free.
Instagram is finding that pictures are worth much more than 1,000 angry words after the company updated its user agreement to say it would have the right to sell posted photos without compensation for use in advertising.
And even if you are paying, companies have the ability to make you accept just about whatever they please. In 2009, GameStation, a company in the UK, put some pretty sneaky stuff in their terms. They didn't take money or your firstborn child. But for one day, their terms stated, by placing an order via this website, you agree to grant us a non-transferable option to claim, now and forevermore, your immortal soul. The contract was only live for a day, but GameStation happened to rake in the lives of 7,000 immortal souls. This was, of course, a joke. However, it makes you wonder, what if there were more serious consequences that might result from not reading terms and conditions?
And what if your phone came with these long terms and conditions said, well, if you use the phone, the government can wiretap you? That would be insane. But that's the kind of world we're living in.
A world where the government could wiretap you because of terms and conditions? So, if you look at the iPhone user agreement, wiretapping isn't mentioned. But in AT&T's privacy policy, they say that they can use data to investigate, prevent, or take action regarding illegal activities. Prevent? In 1994, Pizza Hut became the first major chain to accept a delivery online. Suddenly, the internet needed a way to remember who you were, where you lived, and how you were going to pay.
My question is, what the hell?
Like, how do they know who you are?
Yeah.
Okay, there are these things called cookies, where, like, if you go to a site and buy something, it'll remember you and then create ads for other stuff you might want to buy.
So it learns information about me? Seems like an invasion of privacy.
It wasn't until the late 90s that companies began voluntarily adding privacy policies to explain what was happening with this data. Then, in 2000, an online company called ToySmart went bankrupt. But they had an idea. They tried to sell their database of 195,000 users to another company. This included names, billing information, shopping preferences, and family profiles, even though their privacy policy said they would never share information. People felt like they were being duped.
Lawmakers tell you time and time again that every time they go back to the district, to their district, people are telling them that they want some internet privacy laws. They want some protection.
In early 2001, over a dozen bills were introduced in Congress to protect privacy online.
These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed.
All of the privacy legislation was killed or abandoned, and the Patriot Act was, of course, initiated.
The bill before me takes account of the new realities and dangers posed by modern terrorists. This new law that I signed today will allow surveillance of all communications used by terrorists, including emails, the internet, and cell phones.
The Patriot Act expanded the ability of the federal government to do surveillance in a lot of little ways. You don't need a judge's approval, for instance, to find out what website someone visited, what search terms they typed into Google.
The question of your, if you will, information being retained by Google is not really at this point a Google decision. It's really a political or public policy decision enforced by different governments in different ways.
What if privacy policies weren't about protecting privacy at all, but rather taking it away? Let's take a look at Google's privacy policy around this time to see if any changes were made. So here's Google's privacy policy from December of 2000. Google may also choose to use cookies to store user preferences. A cookie can tell us this is the same computer that visited Google 2 days ago, but it cannot tell us this person is Joe Smith, or even this person lives in the United States. And here's the privacy policy from 1 year later, in December of 2001. Google does this by storing user preferences in cookies and by tracking user trends and patterns of how people search. Google will not disclose cookies to third parties, except as required by a valid legal process, such as a search warrant, subpoena, statute, or a court order. Now, it's important to note the fundamental difference between these two policies. One says that you're totally anonymous. The other says, when necessary, you're not. But here's what's strange. So the first screenshot you saw of Google's oldest policy was taken by a non-profit internet archival service. It records what websites used to look like by taking snapshots, and it's been doing it since the 90s. Now, Google also lists the history of its privacy policies on its own official archive page. In their archives, they state they've got every privacy policy that goes back to the beginning. But what Google shows as their original privacy policy doesn't match that of the archive service. Instead, they show the policy from December of 2001, the one that says that users are not anonymous. Google claims this is their first privacy policy, which it isn't. So why would Google not include its original privacy policy on its own archives page, the one that said you would remain anonymous? What if the data collection that the Patriot Act required became the foundation of a whole new business model, and the foundation of the modern internet as we know it? Would that be something worth covering up?
Even though we don't write checks to Google, and that's one of the reasons we kind of like the company, it doesn't mean that Google's really free, or that we are free in the liberty sense when we use it.
It might feel very different if Google was effectively a $500 a year service, because that's the value of the data that you're providing.
I mean, that was a really critical finding, in that advertising could be, targeted based on information that people were somehow, supplying about themselves. Suddenly, you didn't have to wonder, was somebody watching my commercial? You knew someone clicked on my ad. That meant that they paid attention to it.
In 2012, Google was one of the most valuable stocks in the world. And Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, had become one of the richest men in America.
My job is to help investors figure out for themselves what this thing's worth. So I look at what Facebook has as an asset, which is 900 million people and a ton of data on those people. And I say, if they use 10% of that data, they're going to be the most valuable company ever.
When personal data is worth this much, why would Google or any free internet service be opposed to the data retention that the Patriot Act required? Anonymity wasn't profitable.
The people who are willing to give up a little bit of information in exchange for having access to something that's free or something that's fun, or a free taco. I don't think that ever changes, right? You always want something free. And plenty of people are willing to provide information to get that.
And plenty of companies picked up on this fact.
Let me give you some very practical tips. First of all, I want everybody here to be careful about what you post on Facebook.
What the default settings are on Facebook. This is how most people use this technology. When these companies are building these systems, they know that.
So why isn't the default for everything sharing, every photo, when I start Facebook, why isn't it just for my friends? Why is the default for everybody? Because it's really confusing for my mom to figure out how to just share to her friends.
The way we've designed the site is that it's a community thing, right? So people want to share with just their friends, but a lot of people also want to share with the community around them, right? So I want to share with everyone who works with me at Facebook. I want to share with everyone who went to my college, everyone in the village around me. And those people aren't just my friends.
Even Mark's explanation doesn't make any sense. He says he wants to share with the school, with the quaint village next to him. He doesn't say he wants to share with the entire world. And yet, that's the default.
The challenge with defaults is that you get comfortable with whatever the default is. When the default is public, you actually can adapt really beautifully and deal with it. When the default is private, you can adapt comfortably and deal with it. When the defaults change, that's when problems emerge.
And in fact, that's what Facebook did. In 2009, Facebook made changes to their privacy policy without telling anyone.
Doing a privacy change for 350 million users is a really, it's not the type of thing that a lot of companies would do. We decided that these would be the social norms now, and we just went for it.
You might remember the fan page with over 1 million people who tried to get the policy reversed. What was the big deal, you might ask? Well, over the course of a night, Facebook turned what was once private information into totally public information.
These platforms have an incentive to keep as much information about you and make it as visible as possible.
It's almost the question then becomes, what's
What's the less forgivable sin? Having this crazy one-night stand or not knowing how to use Facebook properly?
Most relationships in your life, it's very good that the other person doesn't know everything you've ever said or scribbled or thought.
When you choose to share a photo album, you go to Facebook and you choose to put those photos there.
Just kind of opt in on every single thing. Opt in. Opt in. Opt in.
I'm okay with Facebook behaving like a company, but I think we need to treat it like a company and not treat it like some benign public utility.
These are the default settings on Facebook in 2005, divided into 12 categories. As time passes, more and more information is shared by default. In 2009, Facebook began automatically sharing personal information with the entire internet. By 2010, everything was shared by default, except for your contact info and your birthday.
We could, if you did a search and a Gmail and a YouTube and so forth yesterday, and you did it from your home, I'll give you the worst case. You did it from your home, and you only have one computer in your home. In theory, we could cross-correlate those and get all three together. We don't do that, and we're not likely to do that.
But in January of 2012, Google made changes to their privacy policy, and they did just that. Google combined all of the information any of their services had collected about a person and put them into one single profile. What Eric Schmidt had said was the worst-case scenario, Google had actually done.
How can you honestly sit here and tell this committee this is not a growing problem?
A good deal of what I was trying to say is that I don't think there is evidence of a market failure or consumer harm from the legal and legitimate use of personal information in commerce. I don't think there's evidence of it.
There are companies that you've never heard of, like Axiom, that claim to have about 1,500 points of data on the average American citizen. Everything from, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, what kind of dog you have, what your sort of psychological outlook is, and all of that can be used to inform decisions that businesses make about us as well.
These are the types of companies that a potential employer would go to try and run a background check on somebody before they hired them. They're able to connect the fact that you went to site A and then later to site B and then eventually to site C and create this detailed history of what sites you visit online.
They don't put your name in the cookie. They put a unique serial number in the cookie that could then be linked to your name in their database.
I don't know if you've ever seen the picture of the ad network ecosystem that shows all the parties in the ad network ecosystem. It's a bit overwhelming.
The information is valuable to different people for different reasons. What if you buy a lot of alcohol? They might want to raise your premiums because they think you're at risk for alcoholism or something like that.
The company might use it in a way that actually harms you.
For example, in 2008, thousands of people suddenly had their credit limits reduced, seemingly for no reason. While on vacation, one wealthy business owner from Atlanta saw his limit plummet from $10,800 to just $3,800, ruining his vacation. The letter he received said this: "Other customers who've used their card at establishments where you recently shopped have a poor repayment history with American Express." This means companies like Walmart. And in Minneapolis, a father came into a Target, outraged that they were sending his teenage daughter pregnancy coupons that were addressed to her. The man thought the Target was trying to encourage his daughter to get pregnant. As it turned out, thanks to her shopping habits, Target knew that this high schooler was pregnant before her own father did. The father later apologized. And in the Netherlands, data was being used to harm customers in a whole new way. Now, while you're driving and using a GPS, that GPS is sending back signals that tell how fast you're moving. It's really useful for helping us avoid traffic, but that got a little company called TomTom wondering who else might be interested in knowing the speed of traffic. And so in the Netherlands, the data that people were willingly trading to find a faster way home was being sold to the authorities to give those same drivers tickets.
It's the reason we don't have any baseline consumer privacy law because of the FBI? No. That is largely due to lobbying by companies that have built extremely lucrative businesses around these business activities and don't want to do anything to disrupt that.
Under Facebook's terms and conditions, a user must be 13 or older. Despite this, according to a recent Consumers Report study, an estimated 7.5 million users were younger than 13.
First of all, we don't allow people to have accounts under the age of 13.
And my reaction to that is that's just absolutely indefensible. I mean, it's unbelievable that you would say that.
Well, Senator, I just want to say we really emphatically agree with your points.
They say that Facebook sent an army of lawyers so that the final privacy legislation that emerged in 2011 was watered down significantly in a way that wouldn't affect Facebook's business model.
My name is Alan Davidson, and I am the Director of Public Policy for Google in North and South America. My message today is simple. As we've heard, mobile services create enormous social and economic benefits.
I reject the notion that privacy protection is the enemy of innovation. It absolutely doesn't have to be, and isn't.
It was an expensive year of lobbying for these big companies. Google spent 5 times as much as the year before, and Facebook spent 4 times as much.
Senate Bill 242 will protect users of social networking internet sites. It will protect these users from identity theft and from unwanted contact by keeping their private information private, of course, unless they agree to share it.
I know that many members, including myself, do not want to negatively impact a very important industry for the state of California.
Individuals involved in this industry don't want to see any regulation whatsoever. So I think that's really the key.
And one of the most interesting things I found in these conversations is that many members of the legislature don't even have social network sites because they're concerned about their privacy.
And at the time the bill was being heard, although lobbyists were in the committee room for the entire hearing, they did not come forward to speak. So it was sort of an interesting process, sort of a stealth killing of the bill without the opportunity for the public to really see who was in opposition. So people like Google and Facebook were in strong opposition, Facebook in particular.
What did Facebook have to lose?
You know, I really do not understand their logic, and you'd have to ask them about that. But when I analyze an issue like this...
I'd love to ask them about that. They won't talk to me, so...
I'm not surprised.
I don't think the rules of law and regulation necessarily apply when it comes to, interacting with, a company that wants to sell you something.
Yeah, we should be worried.
But worried about what? Sure, the data collection allowed by privacy policies had fueled commerce, but was there something more serious we were agreeing to? Total Information Awareness, a program initiated by the government in January of 2002. Its mission? To collect every digital transmission imaginable. And yes, this was their real symbol, the eye of the pyramid, scanning the Earth with a laser beam. It actually looks oddly similar to what's inside of Mark Zuckerberg's hoodie.
Making the world more open and connected.
Oh my God, it's like a secret cult.
Total Information Awareness was a program designed to connect the dots, to link banking activities, to flight searches, to online activities.
But the Pentagon is clearly moving to create the largest electronic eye ever to look at any and all Americans.
You're looking for trends and transactions that are associated with some potential terrorist act.
They believe that with enough data that they could predict who would be engaging in nefarious crimes.
The public was outraged. Congress was outraged. The program was shut down.
The lesson that the government learned after the failure of Total Information Awareness was that if you're going to create a gigantic spying program, don't give it a creepy name.
there's nothing to prevent them from developing the same capabilities, just in smarter ways from their standpoint.
A wiretap requires a court order. Nothing has changed, by the way.
But in reality, lots had changed.
We were told one day in late 2002 that an NSA representative was coming to the office.
Mark Klein came to us at the Electronic Frontier Foundation with data and documents that showed that AT&T was engaged in a wiretapping program.
The NSA is much different from the CIA. First of all, it's about 3 times the size. It costs far more. It's tremendously more secret than the CIA. And what it does is very different. It's focused on eavesdropping, on tapping into major communications links.
They actually had a secret room in their facilities, and they were creating a copy of internet traffic and sending it to the NSA.
So in a sense, they are vacuuming up, scooping up every...
They are blindly vacuuming up everything going across those links.
And you're certain of that?
I'm certain of that.
So President Bush owned up to it.
I authorized the National Security Agency to intercept the international communications of people with known links to Al-Qaeda and related terrorist organizations.
It's taken less than 24 hours after the Bush presidency ended for a former analyst at the National Security Agency to come forward to reveal new allegations about how this nation was spied on by its own government.
The National Security Agency had access to all Americans' communications, faxes, phone calls, and their computer communications.
Is there a recording somewhere of every conversation I had with my little nephew in upstate New York? Is it like that?
It would be everything, yes. It would be everything.
But then a beacon of hope arrived in the White House.
Hi, Senator Obama. I appreciate your giving us the opportunity to ask you questions. I'm an attorney who represents federal whistleblowers, and I was very disappointed when I learned that you supported the bill that lets phone companies off the hook when they've helped the federal government without warrant wiretap phones.
I recognize that some people feel like, yeah, well, the phone companies still were complicit in this. They should be held accountable still. I understand that argument. But the problem was the surveillance program is actually one that I believe is necessary for our national security.
So they were immune, but that means that the programs are still shut down, right?
The programs are shut down?
Yeah, the wiretapping program.
And I have no reason to believe that the wiretapping programs have been shut down. No, if the wiretapping programs had been shut down, then I don't believe that the government and AT&T would still be fighting in court for the legality of it.
So Barack Obama hasn't changed anything?
No, Barack Obama did not shut those programs down after he took office, even though he had threatened to before he became president.
When we got started just in my dorm room at Harvard, you know, the question that a lot of people asked was, why would I want to put any information on the internet at all? Like, why would I want to have a website? And people have really gotten comfortable not only sharing more information and different kinds, but more openly and with more people. And that social norm is just something that's evolved over time.
You may have seen the Onion take on Facebook, which was the CIA has just announced its most recent handy invention, Facebook.
According to Department of Homeland Security reports, Facebook has replaced almost every other CIA information gathering program since it was launched in 2004.
After years of secretly monitoring the public, we were astounded so many people would willingly publicize where they live, their religious and political views, an alphabetized list of all their friends' personal email addresses, phone numbers, hundreds of photos of themselves, and even status updates about what they were doing moment to moment. It is truly a dream come true for the CIA.
You know, the FBIs and the NSAs of the world are appreciative of the fact that Google and Facebook, you know, have built business models around collecting user data because it makes their jobs much easier.
That article in Time started with this anecdote. They're sitting in their transparent cubicle in their open space in Facebook. Robert Mueller was the one man in the room with a tie on, and he was older in a suit, And he comes in and he says, I was just in the building and I wanted to say hello to Mark Zuckerberg. So he says hello to Mark Zuckerberg, a little chit chat, and then he leaves. And everybody's saying, what the hell was that? Now, nobody asks the question, why was Mueller in the building? He's the head of the FBI.
On the one hand, Mark Zuckerberg has said he wants to create a more open society, and Facebook is a way to do that. On the other hand, you know, there's a lot about the way that Facebook uses information that people don't know.
If only there was a way of knowing how much information these companies were storing about us. Well, in the case of Facebook, we learned some pretty interesting things thanks to one student in Austria. And unlike the US, Europe has a law that requires a company to tell a customer what data they have stored on them, if that customer wants to know. And Facebook, unlike most major internet companies, had actually built a headquarters in Europe.
Apparently we were like the only 3 people that were like pushing hard enough and like asking again and again and again, and going through also the Irish authority to finally really get at least like a bigger part of our data set. We still didn't get everything right now. Got it right there, just to have like an idea how much it actually is. That's like just to picture it and to see how much it is.
Wow, this is more than a baby.
Yeah, that's 1,222 pages. I'm a member of Facebook for 3 years, but I was using it more intense for like the last 1.5 years or so. What's interesting as well is that I didn't post too much actually. Like I'm a person who posts something like once a week or so.
With this giant ream of information in front of me, is it hard to go through it and actually find specific details about a person?
No, that's super easy because it's I mean, we just used the search function in the PDF file. So you just type in one word, let's say a demonstration or sex or a political party or something, and within a second you find the right information. So within a couple of minutes you can figure out what people voted for, what, I don't know, psychological problems they have, what parties they've been to. All these informations are like really easy to find actually. While using that service for such a short time, you still had a data file that's bigger than anything that any CIA, FBI, or I don't know, Stasi ever had about an average person. If you hit the remove button, it just means that it's flagged as deleted. So you hide it actually from yourself. But anyone like Facebook or any government agency that wants to look at it later can still retrieve it and get it back. And that means that it's there for an indefinite time. Even though you hit the delete button and they ask you 3 times if you really, really want to delete it.
It's not actually gone.
It's not actually gone, it's still there.
So we've ultimately adopted roughly the following rule. We think of it as we anonymize the information within 18 months.
It might be anonymized after 18 months, but all of the searches that we've ever done are still there. The underlying data is still there to be de-anonymized at some point.
And de-anonymizing search records turns out to be shockingly easy. That is, taking private searches and finding out whose records they are. In 2006, AOL turned over a bunch of these anonymized search records of their users to the public, and it only took a few short hours for a reporter to decode who user number 4417749 was. Between searches for things like numb fingers, 60 single men, and dog that urinates on everything, the reporter uncovered a woman named Thelma Arnold. She was age 62. But then there's user 1755669, who looked up how to kill your wife multiple times, along with decapitated photos, and then in the middle, the user actually looks up steak and cheese. Steak and cheese! And there were plenty of users online who were quick to judge what was going on here. It was murder.
Really? Easy. Hey, old friend. Easy. So, let's take a seat and I'm going to show you something. Okay. What I'm showing you here is a list of anonymized search records. These records were released by AOL. Are there actually things on this list that you know you've searched for before?
Sure. Yeah, I have definitely. I've definitely looked up car crash photos. I've definitely typed in decapitated. I've definitely looked up dead people photos. I've definitely looked up wife killer. Yeah. In fact, I've looked up every single search term I'm looking at here.
You see, Jerome had been a writer on Cold Case, a TV show where each week cops have to solve a murder mystery.
Oh, that's always what scared me when I was entering those search terms, was if there's some sort of automated system that just red flags you based on the search term, they're not going to look and say, oh yeah, he was probably working on a TV show, and that's why he was just Googling how to murder my cheating wife.
What?
I just wanted to confirm that I had not murdered you and that you were alive.
No, I am allowed to come out of this room. And our baby's safe.
Okay, good.
It has a clean diaper.
Oh, thank God.
So we can rest assured you are not a murderer.
I am not a murderer.
You are a writer.
I'm a writer.
Okay.
Glad we could clear that up.
Glad we could clear that up.
So, what would happen if that red flag system did exist? If a dad like Jerome might someday have his door knocked on because his search records became public.
Consensus seems to be that the retention of this kind of information should be greater than 0 days. And the reason it has to do with police actions, terrorists, Patriot Act, all those sorts of things.
It turns out that in this environment, the digital environment, there's a loophole to the Fourth Amendment, which is if a third party collects a lot of this information, the government doesn't have to go through those same hoops. It's called the third party doctrine.
The third party doctrine means that when you, a consumer, share your data with a bank, with an email provider, with a search engine, with any kind of technology company, you have basically given up what would have been your Fourth Amendment protections over that data.
For the government to get information from a Google or a Facebook is a lot easier than the government doing it itself and putting a wiretap on our phones.
Large companies like Google and Facebook receive thousands of requests a year from government agencies. Facebook has 25 employees doing nothing but surveillance. And these companies routinely receive requests, they process the request.
You may be surprised to hear that secret searches of email by the government seem to be commonplace.
Law that governs when the government can get electronic communications, like emails and things that are stored in remotely, was written in 1986. And it can have effects that allow the government to at least claim that they should be able to get location data without a warrant. Or at one point, the government was claiming that it doesn't need a warrant to get emails that you've opened.
Well, in the spring of 2011, the Department of Justice, and in particular the FBI, made several requests to internet companies as part of an investigation relating to individuals associated with WikiLeaks.
We released 400,000 classified documents.
For those of you who don't know who Julian Assange is, he started WikiLeaks. Now, in the past, WikiLeaks has released secret documents related to the Iraq War, Guantanamo Bay, and Afghanistan.
And that's, obviously a positive development for those of us who think that information should be more accessible almost no matter what. And obviously is a threatening development to those institutions like corporations, in many cases, that depend on secrecy.
I condemn the action that WikiLeaks has taken. It puts at risk our national security.
Twitter received an order that requested data regarding certain Twitter users. These were all users that were related to the whistleblower website WikiLeaks. However, it wasn't just an order, it was actually a D order, and it came with a gag order. It required that Twitter never speak publicly about the fact that they had received this request.
Denouncing the move, Assange said he believes other American internet companies, such as Facebook and Google, may also have been ordered to disclose information.
Companies like Amazon, Yahoo, Dropbox, even Facebook will be capable of handing data to the government without first informing users.
Even if you think what the people are doing is wrong, that's why the First Amendment exists, to protect unpopular people engaging in unpopular speech.
But Twitter fought back. They released the information to the users and let them know ahead of time, and they were successful in getting the gag order overturned. Meanwhile, Amazon, PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa, they all gave in to the pressure regarding their users.
A culture of loyalty to not you, but a greater cause is important to be successful, it seems like to me. And it's disloyal, in this case, to the country.
While President Bush might think it's disloyal, thanks to Twitter standing up for the privacy of activists like Julian Assange, you can now be shown this.
Today,
We release over 287 files documenting the reality of the international mass surveillance industry. An industry which now sells equipment to dictators and democracies alike in order to intercept entire populations. 9/11 has provided a license for European countries, for United States, Australia, Canada, South Africa, and others to develop spying systems that affect all of us.
The spy files show the massive industry that surrounds selling to the US government and governments around the world.
Instead of having something called the Total Information Awareness Act with this big symbol with the eye of the pyramid looking at everybody and scanning the world with its sinister laser beams, instead they just have a bunch of companies that exist that are providing bits of those capabilities that are provided under different contracts that go up to the same agency, the same people.
One of the most popular is called massive intercept, and basically what governments are trying to do with this is get as much information as possible from our communications so they can analyze that and detect patterns in that.
And it's interesting, you know, in your article that you really talk about the secretive nature of the business, that they sell through trade shows which are not open to the media.
But we actually went to one of these conventions. It was pretty easy. We just called and asked for a pass. So we talked to the representative from one of these companies, a firm called Celebrate. They were included in the spy files. They're a company that sells cell phone extraction tools to every major government sector in the US.
So my name is Christopher Shin. I'm the Vice President of Engineering for Celebrate USA. Today I'm presenting to you the Celebrate UFED system, to my right here. It is a device used to extract countless information from mobile devices, so text messages, pictures, video, audio, call logs, that kind of thing. It's used by agencies across the United States and the world. Yeah, the iPhone specifically stores a lot of information, more than your normal handset. It really is a digital store of your personal life, your business life, and this is why the field is actually, it's been growing exponentially over the last couple of years. So as the devices get more complex, they can hold more information. This is one of the most personal devices to you today, even more than your laptop. So we think of ourselves as basically a tool manufacturer, just like Glock or Beretta is producing a firearm. We're producing a tool that does a certain task, and we're marketing that tool only towards, just like you can't go out and just buy a handgun without credentials. We're not just selling it to everybody. So.
But could you conceivably sell it, or are there laws against it?
There are no laws against selling this to someone that's not in law enforcement or government, something like that. If someone was to dump my phone tomorrow, they might get a good laugh out of the content in it, but I don't think I'd be put in jail. So I think that it really depends on how you look at it. I mean, there are privacy concerns, but I'm a little bit more on the, I guess, the liberal side of my privacy being exposed. I mean, other people, of course, that's a completely different, it's a completely personal view. My device, my phone itself, I mean, I actually take that back. I have a lot of work-related information on my BlackBerry. So if this information did get out, I probably would be pretty concerned. So.
The surveillance vendors target two types of customers. They target governments directly, and then they also target internet service providers and telecommunications carriers who are tasked with the responsibility of spying on their own customers.
For example, there was a little piece of software that had been installed on every phone in America. This software was called Carrier IQ. And thanks to a little video that a systems administrator from Connecticut posted on YouTube, the world now knows that this software had been monitoring our every keystroke.
553, and so on and so forth.
According to Carrier IQ's chief marketer, they're aware this information is sensitive and call it a treasure trove. It became big enough of a deal that Al Franken decided to take this issue to Congress.
Mr. Director, millions of Americans have smartphones with pre-installed software designed by a company called Carrier IQ. Recent research has shown that it captures a broad range of sensitive information.
Let me start off by saying we have neither sought nor obtained any information from Carrier IQ in any one of our investigations.
Okay, not directly from Carrier, but what about from the wireless carriers?
No, I don't believe so. If you're specifying the use of the carrier IQ software in by a wireless carrier, have we sought that? I do not know in the information we seek from wireless carriers or what have you, and I'm not talking about carrier IQ, I'm talking about wireless carriers that we may obtain information that in some way carrier IQ may have been involved with.
Why would the FBI need carrier IQ to send them all of this information? After all, they could be using any of these services that were included in the spy files. Take this product, for instance, Scan and Target, which claims that it can search through the SMS, the IMs, Twitter, emails, Facebook, blogs, and forums, all while analyzing huge volumes of information in real time. Or Fisher, which demonstrates how police can infiltrate anyone's system through a variety of videos that used to be available on their website. They even show the agent hacking into Google and Facebook in their demo.
Who has this kind of equipment?
Massive interception equipment is sold by surveillance vendors around the world. So it's really up for grabs for anyone who wants it and can pay the price.
The Fisher system was sold to Egypt to monitor people who oppose their leader. These are the actual documents. It even includes training for 2 to 4 people for the low price of about 11 grand. Or the Hacking Teams project, which advertises that it can track hundreds of thousands of cell phones, all on one system. Or software like Kapow, that analyzes all social networks, with features like the ability to search out keywords and phrases.
Everything that happens on Facebook, and it shows the frequency of conversations between one person and another, and all that kind of thing.
That allows for a lot of profiling. It creates massive databases for law enforcement to exploit and often misread.
With hundreds of companies offering these services, why would the FBI need to use carrier IQ?
Everything coming from a cell phone, everything coming from a computer, anything that's going over the internet out of the country or even internal within the country can be monitored using this kind of equipment.
If you look at news stories now about what they call big data is really looking up the question of how can government and corporations work with that data in order to look for anomalies and predict when you're going to do something so they can stop you from doing it.
And the government isn't even that secretive about it. If you visit their business website, there's an application there looking for developers to create better tools for mass surveillance of our online activity. Examples for surveillance include, but are not limited to, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Which brings us back to that word you'll find in many user agreements. It's the word that sent us down this whole path in the first place. Prevent. So this might make you wonder, what potential threats would all of the surveillance we agreed to actually prevent?
Basically, January the 3rd, 20 days before I go on holiday, I tweet, "Are you free this week for a gossip/prep before I go destroy America?" Ended the tweet with a kiss, as threatening as that is. 20 days later, get on a flight, go to LAX. We had a hotel in Hollywood Boulevard. We were just gonna potter around for a week, just looking around, just being tourists. Got off the plane, went through the passport control, swiped my passport through, and they're like, "Can you come this way?" And I was like, it's because I got an Irish passport. I thought maybe Irish people is like stereotype, IRA bombers. They went through my suitcase, and I was like, oh, what are you doing? And then when they pulled me into the holding room, I was questioning me for 5 hours about whether I had a Twitter account. I was like, are you being serious? Are you actually holding me because of a tweet? And they're like, what do you mean by destroy America? And I was like, to party, it means to go wild, get drunk. Any moron that could read that tweet can see what it's meant as. Like, it ends with a kiss. I'm sure, like, Hitler doesn't end his memoirs with a kiss or whatever he did. So then they moved us to a holding room. But then at midnight, the staff changed over, and they weren't aware of what we were there for, so they handcuffed us, stuck us in the back of a police van, and then took us to a downtown, like, prison detention center. Innocent people shouldn't be treated like absolute dirt, and they were dragging us around, pushing us into walls.
Sounds like a horrible vacation. Is the government refunding you at least?
No, they won't comment on what happened. Well, if I'd put I was going to paint the town red, they'd have me done for graffiti as well, wouldn't they? When I go to other countries, this is going to show up that I got refused from America, so more than likely I'm now going to get dragged off at every airport and questioned about what happened, and I have to explain to them that it was a tweet.
I'm Italian, Irish, French, Portuguese, Native American, Black, I'm even like 1/18th Avatar.
This is Joe Lipari. Joe Lipari had had a rough day at the Apple store. He had been forced to wait in line for 4 hours before finally leaving.
So I get home from the Apple store, still a little irritated, smoke a little dope, put on Fight Club, just trying to relax, go on Facebook.
And this button-down Oxford cloth psycho might just snap and then stalk from office to
office with an armored AR-10 gas-powered semi-automatic weapon. And I said the same thing, but except the Apple store.
Jumping round after round.
And, basically word for word, except for where. Hanging out on Facebook, getting ready to go to yoga class, and there's a shave and a haircut. 2 bits, knock on my door. So I was like, hey, maybe somebody's here to watch Fight Club with me. Open it up, boom, NYPD SWAT, their bulletproof vests on, their guns drawn, and they tear the place apart. They really go through everything. When the one cop, finds the box that has all my military awards, he comes bringing it down. He's like, oh, you were in the military? And we start talking Army talk. He sees that I speak the language. And that's when he asked me, he was like, so do you know what an armored AR-10? And I was like, that's why you're here, guys. You're here because I made a bad joke on Facebook. It blew my mind. It's the ultimate buzzkill, really. Your Facebook page is brought SWAT to your house. They told me not to go far from New York because I'm going to be needed for all these court cases for a year. They claim one of my Facebook friends called 911, which is another thing I think is bogus. So I asked for the 911 tape, which they keep on file. They have to. And it's my right. It's my stuff. They have to give me my mugshots if I want it. So they come back and say, turns out it wasn't someone that called 911. It was someone that just walked into the police station, and that's something we don't keep a record of. And how'd you get my address? I lived there for 10 days. I didn't update my mailing address yet. All my banking stuff was still going to my old apartment. There was nothing saying I lived there except for a verbal agreement.
3 minutes after being done with my lunch, I was told to go up to the office, and then I would sat down inside the vice principal's office, and I wasn't told what was going on until maybe 10 minutes later.
My phone rings, I look at it, and it was the number to his school, and I answer it, and it's the school security guard just giving me a FYI, for your information, just to give you a heads up, the Secret Service is here with the Tacoma Police Department, and they have Vito, and they're talking to him.
A man walked in a suit and glasses, and he said that he was part of the Secret Service, and he told me it was because of a post that I made, and it indicated as a threat towards the president.
Yes, a 7th grade boy was visited by our FBI because of a red flag that came up in their spy system.
I was saying how Osama is dead and for Obama to be careful because there might be suicide bombers.
It didn't consider his age, or that his comment about Obama needing to watch out was one of concern. The machine simply determined that based on a series of words, Vito was a potential threat.
Pre-crime, their belief, this potential breach of the peace, their belief that you might cause a crime. There's pre-crime arrest and minority report.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubin. Take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours and 4 minutes.
No, I didn't do anything. This arrest that happened on the royal wedding day when I attended a zombie flash mob wedding picnic.
Right.
And myself and 4 other zombies were arrested preemptively for potential breach of the peace.
Even if you dress up as a zombie, it seems to me that the crime isn't really committed until you eat some brains.
Yeah. To be fair, we did have some brain cake.
Oh.
So there's that.
How did they know that you were going to be dressing up as a zombie this day? There could have been emails or anything.
It could have been, it's hard to know, yeah.
I think that's the toughest
That's the scary
right?
thing, yeah.
Yeah.
The indication that they were monitoring private social networks came in the way they were reacting to certain things and asking about certain things. So they were asking about maggots and asking about climbing gear, which they must have heard about through some exchanges on the internet, neither of which was true. Nobody had maggots or climbing gear. Not something that was itself posing a hazard to the royal wedding celebrations. We were nowhere near the royal wedding celebrations, and we had no plan of going near the royal wedding celebrations. Anything that wasn't part of the official, ostentatious, joyous, expensive celebrations of this wedding of two strangers was prevented from happening. And that seems deeply disturbing. You can see that surveillance measures are being used to silence protests before they even happen.
This was, of course, the royal wedding. We'd all helped pay for the royal wedding. It was it wasn't just a private wedding.
You're arresting a professor of anthropology that runs a street theatre group.
One of the keys. Thank you very much. No, we took the keys.
We couldn't believe this was happening. It was just, we were so obviously a street theatre troupe. Some of us had actually got the costume on, So we were locked away in Lewisham Police Station for 25 hours. Once the whole wedding was safely over, we were let out. For the first time, as far as I'm aware in this country, a number of us, something like 50 of us, were arrested and in most cases incarcerated for thinking about protest, for thinking about, in this case, some street theatre.
A lot of life is based upon trust. I mean, if you have a conversation with your inner circle on a key strategic decision that is vital to your company, and you read about it in the newspaper before the decision is implemented, in other words, you get preempted from acting because somebody inside your company has talked, you're not going to like it, and it'll hurt.
The activists didn't need to commit any crime. They just needed to text, to email, and to call each other about potentially protesting.
But I think that the answer is not to take away the capacity of looking at the public actions of citizens and keeping a record of them. The solution is to make sure that we elect better governments.
So one of the things I hear a lot is, who cares if they're collecting all of this information about me? I don't have anything to hide, so why does it matter?
Well, I know this argument, and it is not very new. It's old-fashioned, saying we are complying with rules, and so what happens?
Between leading the sinful life I would like to lead and hoping that governments will protect my privacy, or assuming that no one's going to protect my privacy and leading a less sinful life, I'll go with the latter. It's simply just the odds of success seem higher to me.
I congratulate the people who say they have nothing to hide. I don't believe them. And I also say that they're probably hiding something from someone. We all do.
You have nothing to hide till you do. And you are not necessarily going to know what you have to hide or not.
You might remember the case of Millie, a teenage girl in Britain who disappeared in 2002.
Police in Surrey say they're growing increasingly concerned about the safety of a 13-year-old girl who hasn't been seen since Thursday afternoon.
Before the police found her body, her parents were holding on to hopes that she might still be alive.
I'd say if someone has taken Millie and is holding her, then please, please give her back to us.
Why is that, you might ask? Well, because according to phone records, Millie had checked and deleted her voicemail.
We were sitting downstairs in reception and I rang her phone.
Yes.
And it clicked through onto her voicemail, so I heard her voice.
Yes.
And it was just like I jumped. She's picked up her voicemails, Bob, she's alive. And I was just, it was then, really.
As it turned out, members of Rupert Murdoch's corporation had been hacking into Millie's phone, trying to be the first to reveal details of this national news story.
Right, I think this is the watershed moment when finally the public start to see and feel, above all, just how low and how disgusting this particular newspaper's methods were.
This was a murdered schoolgirl, and the thought that a very tight-knit circle of very senior politicians linked up very closely, intimately, with the police and with the media mogul, Rupert Murdoch.
For 30 years, as British prime ministers came and most certainly went, a constant character in their worlds was Rupert Murdoch. the billionaire media mogul whose press...
For years, celebrities and individuals like Millie had the voicemails they thought were hidden and private accessed by Rupert Murdoch's corporation at the expense of people like Millie's parents. And it took nearly a decade to expose the misuse of this highly personal data.
Transparency, which, bonds us together and gives us all so many friends that we didn't know before, but all these friends that are connected, gives the state an absolutely unparalleled in the history of humanity ability to know what's going on in its citizens, to find out who the dissenters are.
The government is making whistleblowing a crime. They are making dissent a crime, especially when it embarrasses the government and calls the government to account.
If sources are going to get discovered, and if whistleblowers cannot securely and anonymously provide that information to journalists, we as a society won't know when our rights are being silently violated.
Of course, the president has defended his administration the only way he knows how.
If we can root out folks who have leaked, they will suffer consequences.
If you look at a technical perspective, the technologies of maintaining privacy are actually running ahead of the technologies that break it. For example, encryption, which can maintain your privacy, is running ahead of decryption.
But what if there was a way to store information until it could be decrypted?
U.S. intelligence officials will soon be allowed to keep information on U.S. citizens much longer than they used to, even if those citizens have no known ties to terrorism. Under new rules, the government can store data it gathers for 5 years. That's up from the current limit of 6 months.
General Alexander, if Dick Cheney were elected president and wanted to detain and incessantly waterboard every American who sent an email making fun of his well-known hunting mishaps, what I'd like to know is, does the NSA have the technological capacity to identify those Cheney bashers based upon the content of their emails?
In the United States, we would have to go through an FBI process, a warrant, to get that and serve it to somebody to actually get it.
But you do have the capability of doing it.
But not in the United States.
There are new questions about the National Security Agency's massive spy center under construction in the desert of Utah. Once finished, it'll be 5 times the size of the U.S. Capitol building. The NSA is not allowed to spy on Americans, but now a whistleblower has come forward saying that the agency is doing it anyway.
This massive agency that's collecting a tremendous amount of information every day by satellites and tapping the cell phones and data links and your computer email links and so forth. And then it has to store it someplace, and that's why they built Bluffdale. It's going to cost $2 billion. It's being built in this area on a military base outside of Salt Lake City in Bluffdale. As I said, they had to actually extend the boundary of the town so it would fit into it. And the whole purpose of this is the centerpiece of this massive eavesdropping complex, this network that was created after 9/11.
The reality of information technology is it progresses exponentially, only information technology. Exponential growth starts out very slow, looks like nothing's happening, you're doubling tiny little numbers, and suddenly it takes off. And we've seen that with paradigm after paradigm, like social networks in recent times.
In 1984, to store 1 gigabyte of data cost $85,000. By 2012, it cost about 5 cents. In the city of Chungking, there are about 500,000 cameras. In 2012, the cost of permanently recording a high-resolution feed was $300 million. By the year 2020, the projected cost is less than $3 million.
The UK, being one of the cultures that's introduced cameras most ubiquitously and most quickly, so far the population seems fine with it. If they weren't, they know who to call.
There are 2,000 cameras, and soon there will be 3,000, all of which feed into this control center housed in a secret location.
And I can call up in real time all instances where a camera caught someone wearing a red shirt. This is the shape and the size of a potentially suspicious unattended package.
Many police departments set to use controversial new devices capable of scanning people's faces, then checking that information against a criminal database.
When we're at war, when you're protecting your society against people who want to come in and kill civilians, you have to be able to defend what we're doing. You have to be able to defend our way of life, and you have to put these powers into somebody's hands.
According to the Brookings Institution, this kind of pervasive monitoring will provide what amounts to a time machine, allowing authoritarian governments to perform retrospective surveillance. For example, if an anti-regime demonstrator previously unknown to security services is arrested, it will be possible to go back in time to scrutinize the demonstrator's phone conversations, automobile travels, and the people he or she met in the months and even years leading up to the arrest.
The government is using the existence of terms of service to justify the surveillance state that we now live in.
The messages are free to use, and most importantly, they're encrypted, so the police can't actually get in there to encrypt in what's happened. So that's prompted calls to shut down the entire network.
It's easy to justify using these technologies to stop a riot. But shouldn't we be concerned when the government is able to read our emails, text messages, phone calls, search history, to track our movements and limit our free speech? What crime did that 7th grade boy really commit? Is having zombies at a royal wedding really so bad? What about Millie's parents? And what happens when these technologies are used to watch peaceful protesters, like all of the people at Occupy Wall Street or the Tea Party folks? What happens if the government doesn't like tents being set up? Despite all of this, it was starting to seem like, so what? So what if the government can acquire all of this information? Maybe it's good they can keep the peace when riots are happening. And besides, maybe it was already too late. Do you think privacy is dead?
I mean, it's certainly dying. Whether or not for privacy I mean, privacy is going to remain dead unless there's a really fundamental shift in the dynamics by which that's decided. By which I mean the only real effective response is to monitor and to change the behavior, the tendencies of the intelligence industry and law enforcement and all that, and even companies. And that's very, very unlikely.
I don't know exactly who the us is, but I'm very critical of us. I think that this is an area in which we have allowed ourselves to be smitten. We want this technology to grow and grow, and we don't want anything to rain on our parade. And we have woken up to the privacy concerns, in my view, at least 4 years too late.
I mean, is privacy dead?
Yeah, without question. Without question, yeah, it's dead.
It's safe to work under the assumption that nothing's private. You know, anything that's been digitized is not private. And that is terrifying.
When this becomes the size of a blood cell, then I can just send them into my brain and my body through the bloodstream. This will become quite ubiquitous, and it really will be part of who we are. And people say, well, okay, that's going to be a real threshold to move beyond, but I don't think so. It's a very smooth continuum from, when I was a student and had to take my bicycle to get to the computer, to having it in my pocket, to having it in my body. There's a convenient place to put it. I won't lose it that way.
But they say if you put a frog in a pot of water and slowly turn up the heat, the frog will just die because it doesn't realize it's boiling. And I think that, like anything else, I think we're opting in a centimeter at a time. And, pretty soon you're pretty far down the road. You look behind you and you sort of wonder how you got where you were. I think that's true.
it's just completely out of control. I mean, it's just, sky's the limit, you know? They know everything about us now.
It takes someone, it takes someone who's in charge of laws having what is being done to American citizens done to their email account, done to their Facebook profile.
They're going to pay attention to it.
All of these powerful institutions, they're not subject to the same invasions of privacy as the rest of us are.
Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, once said,
if you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Then he got very angry when CNET, which is owned by CBS, published a picture of his house. Well, when you ask Google about do not track, they claim we have to understand how to define that before we can implement any technology. Do not track is pretty simple. It means we don't want to be tracked. The only reason Google doesn't understand it is because Google doesn't want to implement it.
Unless someone comes and makes it no longer practical for them to engage in that kind of activity, pressure is put upon CEOs of the companies. They're going to engage in it.
Dawn. We're going by the Facebook campus right now. Really have no idea what to expect. I've not had breakfast. He'll know that I checked in here too, so that's good. He knows that I'm right next to his house. Let's see, we have here's the exact quote from Mark. So, having two identities for yourself is an example of a lack of integrity. Lack of integrity. They just did a knock up on his door, so it seems very likely that we might get a Mark Zuckerberg sighting today. I mean, you might not be wrong, Vince. He might actually have a tunnel. There's some definite motion in the yard. Is there a dog? Here we go. That's it. Walking out. Mr. Zuckerberg? Hey, I'm working on a documentary. Got a little blog here, but wondering if I could just ask you a couple questions.
No, sorry.
Really?
I can't work.
Can I ask, do you still think privacy is dead? What are your real thoughts on privacy?
Are you guys recording?
We are.
Can you please not?
I can stop, yeah. All right. Mark Zuckerberg had asked me to please not record him, so we shut off the main camera. But since Mark doesn't seem to mind storing our data after we think it's been deleted, this only seemed fair.
Can you please not?
I can stop, yeah. All right. Can I come by your front desk, though, and ask about setting up an interview?
Yeah, I mean, we have a department where you can talk to people about that.
Yeah, I know. I've tried going through it a few times, and I never hear back. There's a major difference here. Mark loosens up after he thinks we've stopped recording. And you see that? That right there. That's a smile. Mark Zuckerberg smiled at me. And you know why? Because he thought I had stopped recording, and he was relieved. Imagine what a relief it would be if all of these companies and the government stopped recording everything we do, if we could just make a simple request to them, something that Mark Zuckerberg knows how to ask for. Can you please not? Can you please not record us, monitor us, and share our information unless we ask first? We need terms and conditions that are reasonable. And we need privacy policies that promote the most basic principles of our democracy, rather than taking them away. Or, as a young senator once said, back before he became president,
we need to find a way forward to make sure that we can stop terrorists while protecting privacy and liberty of innocent Americans. We have to find a way to give the president the power he needs to protect us while making sure that he doesn't abuse that power.
And that simple principle that there's somebody watching the watcher, whether that's on an issue of freedom of the press or it's an issue of warrantless wiretaps, that simple principle is one that we can't give up, and we don't have to give up.
well, Mr. President, we are watching. And I guess we have to ask ourselves one simple question. Do we agree?
Tie rise to the occasion. A million tiny flashlights, I gotta turn it off. Cold feet and a tie rise to the occasion. A million tiny flashlights, I gotta turn it off. For a while I'll keep my place, but tonight
Washington is caught in its very own episode of Spy versus Spy. The tactics once employed by top intelligence gathering teams at the CIA, sifting through IP addresses, emails, and fake drop boxes, have now been turned against the intelligence community's top official.
The FBI uncovered evidence of an affair between Petraeus and his biographer Paula Broadwell.
That's right. Petraeus had an affair with the author of his fawning biography, All In.
These did not implicate criminal activity. These did not implicate national security. These were not a threat to David Petraeus, the person, or to General Petraeus, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Those are not my words. Those are the FBI's words.
Instead of actually sending those emails, in many cases, they wrote them as drafts in a Gmail account they both had access to, and that way they could both log on and check the draft folder, never having to actually hit send.
Very embarrassing for the Obama administration and for its National Security Command.
It's troubling because there are laws that the FBI has to follow, and he has the right to be protected from an unwarranted, unjustified investigation by the FBI or anyone.
People don't really know how they're being monitored, and they think, well, hey, if it's working, if we keep stopping another 9/11, then it's, quote, worth it.
The greatest fear that I have regarding the outcome for America of these disclosures is that nothing will change.